our children's health. Oh, sorry, I think there was okay. 60% in the United States, 60% of US university students feel often overly anxious. 40% of US university students feel too depressed to function. And 1 in 10 university students has seriously considered suicide. These statistics came via Laurie Santos, who works for Yale University. She quoted this recently about 2012, and the problem has only become worse. She heads up probably the largest program, which is around the science of well-being. What about in India? According to the National Crime Records Bureau, many children have experienced huge uncertainty related to completion of curriculum, exams, results. And sadly, 31 children died by suicide every day in India in 2020. And what about where I live in the UK? Is it any better? No, it is sadly worse. 20% of UK adolescents may experience a mental health problem in any given year. 50% of mental health problems are established by the age of 14. 10% of 5 to 16-year-olds have clinically diagnosable mental problems. Yet, I'm sorry, I think someone got their, okay. Yet 70% of children and adolescents who experience mental health problems have not had appropriate interventions at sufficiently early age. So this is a real problem for us in education. The second monster or problem that I wanted to address is really our children's skills gap. If you look at LinkedIn, a 2018 survey showed that companies' top points of focus were cloud computing, statistical analysis, and data mining. Just 2 years later, only 2 years later, these priorities had changed to blockchain and analytical reasoning among the top desired skill sets. The future potential of the workforce will depend not just on the readily availability of existing skills, but on its ability to nurture the capacity to keep learning and developing new skills and expertise. Now, according to a recent Deloitte report, now Deloitte is a international, they operate in 150 countries. They are a consultancy firm, and they are huge and do research with hundreds of thousands of members of staff. They've identified that this skills gap may leave an estimated 2.4 million positions unfilled between 2018 and 2028, with a potential economic impact of 2.5 trillion, that's US dollars. Now, what do we hear anecdotally is that employers are getting people to come out of university that don't have the skills they need. Universities claim that children are coming up from secondary school without the critical thinking and different types of global skills needed to perform well in university. So here we have this two-headed monster, which is that education today isn't really addressing the mental health crisis that is happening all around the world. And education today isn't really addressing the skills gap enough. And there's also a third-headed monster, which we could talk about for another presentation, I would say, around sustainability. But for today, I want to talk about those two crises, the mental health crisis that's facing the world. And a lot of that is brought on by the pandemic, but it was also before the pandemic. A lot of it is brought on by social media. A lot of it is brought on by the pressures of globalization and the challenges to succeed and the pressures that we all put on ourselves. But it has become much worse. And the skills gap is clear. Technology is driving change faster than ever. People need to be prepared, not just in a knowledge-based economy, but in a skills-based economy. So the question is, what can we as educators do about this two-headed problem, or this problem? We at Oxford University Press, we believe that we need to all introduce a more caring and a more preparing curriculum. Now, you may ask yourself, well, what is that, and where do you start, and how do you do that? And what we did at the Oxford University Press is we did an evidence analysis. Now, what is that? We hired a researcher to actually read every piece of research about well-being. Why? Because we wanted to understand the importance of well-being on education. We wanted to find out what the impact was of promoting student well-being and how that would impact academic attainment. So, what did we find? Now, this is a pretty busy slide, so I'll let you take a look at it, for a second or two. But the most important part here, that Dr. Ariel Lindahl from the Department of Education of the University of Oxford found that there's convincing evidence of a relationship between well-being and academic attainment. Dr. Alejandro Adler conducted a research study with 700,000 participants in Bhutan, Peru, and in Mexico. And they also claimed a direct link between whole school implementation of well-being programs and increased academic attainment. I mean, it's not really that hard to believe that healthy children are better students. So, what have we decided to do at Oxford University Press based on that knowledge? We decided to create a curriculum, and this is what's happening around the world, is that we wanted to have a joy of learning. And the idea here is to nurture students' well-being, to develop their global skills, to equip learners with strategies to cope better with life's uncertainties. And why? To put joy at the heart of learning, to increase healthiness and happiness, and to promote real academic success. Now, you might ask yourselves as educators, we do this, but tell us more. We're interested to know how this can work in practice. What does it look like? So we have the Oxford International Curriculum. It is made up of a curriculum. We have resources, there's assessment, and professional development. Here on this slide, you see a one all-through curriculum approach starting from early years, and I'll speak more about that soon, up into primary, into lower secondary, and then this leads on to preparation for international GCSEs, AS, and A levels. Our curriculum is set up over 6 subjects with one approach to learning. The 6 subjects are 4 of them are your core foundational subjects that really are required everywhere: literacy, numeracy, scientific inquiry, and digital skills, digital literacy, computing. And then we also have 2 other subjects, which one of them is well-being itself, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. And the other is global skills projects, and we'll talk more about that in a second. So what we're doing is promoting and developing and nurturing well-being through education, and we are developing skills through education as an approach or a methodology. And now, how does that work? So on this slide, you can see that there are subjects that have a wraparound. And you see on the left, the red circle is well-being as a subject that can be taught by itself. We believe that you can teach well-being. There is a science to well-being that is based on the PERMA framework that was developed from the University of Pennsylvania out of United States. It is the foremost science of well-being. And what we've done is taken that framework and we have wrapped it around English. We've wrapped it around math and science and computing and global skills, meaning that when you're teaching English, you're also teaching well-being. There are mindful moments. There is encouragement of a growth mindset. There is stretch zone challenges. There is an emphasis on active learning. And the other thing on the right side of your screen now, this global skills, the other monster and problem that we want to help solve. This speaks to global skills. What are global skills? We'll talk about that in a second. But what we do is when you're teaching computing, you're also teaching critical thinking. When you're teaching science, you're also looking at interpersonal skills and creative problem solving skills. So what we have here is a model of systemically developing one's well-being whilst teaching other subjects. I spoke with the world's leading psychologist, Professor Willem Kukin from the University of Oxford, about positive education. And what is positive education? Positive education comes from the positive psychology movement, where we are enabling people to thrive in life. And he told me that it's one thing to teach well-being, which you can do, but you can't leave it there. You can't teach well-being, every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. It has to be something that is woven into other subjects. And that's where you get well-being at the heart of education. And that is something that I encourage all educators to be doing for the future, for tomorrow's education, and for a better future beyond. So here we see our approach to teaching and learning. And let's talk a little bit more about the well-being and about the global skills. So on the top left here, this is the type of skills work: creativity and critical thinking. We have problem solving, curiosity, wonder. We have real world skills. Now, what is a real world skill? Project management is a real world skill. Why not start teaching that when children are 7, 8, 9, 10 years old? They will need that as they get older to understand what is a project, how does one manage projects? What about functional literacy? How do you take care of your money? What about research skills? What about communication and collaboration skills? Absolutely essential. People need to know how to lead, be leaders, to communicate clearly and concisely. Do you need to know a certain fact? Yes, you do. Can you find a certain fact on Google? Yes, you can. But do you need to be a great speaker? I would say, yes, you do. Do you need self-development skills to prepare you? And this goes back to that gap I was talking about, the skills gap before. It's very, very real. That knowledge is becoming as important, but skills is becoming even more important, because we don't know what jobs are going to be out there tomorrow. We don't know what will happen with climate change, with the world and the direction we're going. Who knew so much would be impacted by the COVID pandemic just 4 years ago? And now we are in a new normal. And now let's talk about people's well-being, the red hexagons. So we have 4 areas or domains of learning: taking care of the body. So here we're learning how to keep active, eating healthily. Next, we're talking about taking care of the mind, promoting mindfulness, training learners how to be more optimistic, taking care of relationships. The most important thing for anyone's mental health is the power and the condition of the relationships in your life. It seems simple and obvious, but when we lose our loved ones and our friends and loneliness creeps in, it is the number one most painful part that leads to people's mental health disorders. And then taking care of the world. We encourage students to have a focus and find purpose. This is so important in life for your well-being. Have a purpose, have a meaning. You understand there's difficulty all the time. That we're always having a problem. We're always taking 2 steps forward and 1 back. We get knocked down. But if you know what you're trying to go to, you know why you're doing something, you have a purpose and there's meaning, then that's what keeps you going. And that's what can keep you healthy. Next, how does our curriculum work with all this stuff? Well, we have curriculum frameworks, we have schemes of work, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this, so I'm not going to go too far. Lesson plans, we have in-class resources that a lot of you are using currently. There's assessment, and very importantly, professional development. Here is training. When we talk about a whole school approach to well-being, it's really important to know that training has to happen for senior leadership, principals. Training has to happen for head teachers. Training has to happen for the actual teachers themselves. and it's different types of training for different audiences. We're even considering how to reach out and train parents. And I would highly recommend that to schools if you aren't doing that already, but you probably are. Now, here's a curriculum framework just to give you a little bit more insight. I'm not going to go into this in too much depth. I'm sure you're very familiar with your own national curriculum. You're familiar with the English national curriculum and maybe other international curricula. So you have here learning outcomes. This is very much a learning design theory. This bases itself on a spiral approach, which I'll talk about in a second. So you start with this, like, what is the outcome? What is it that you want someone to know and learn? So in this case, we would like students that can describe how fossils are formed when things that have lived are trapped in rock. So obviously this is science, and this is our year 3. And what I said about that spiral approach, if you look at this going across, so year 1 to year 2, year 2 to year 3, year 3 to year 4, what you see is a deepening of the knowledge and a deepening of the skills. And that is a spiral approach to curriculum design. And here we have a scheme of work. It lays it out week by week. But again, as you're all educators, and I don't need to go into this, just giving you an illustration of how the curriculum comes together. Lesson plans that talk about activities, and you've got differentiation and resources. You've got a context and the learning outcomes. Again, experienced teachers, you're all familiar with this, so I can go right past this. For our global skills projects and our well-being, we have actual content. We have worksheets, and we've got lesson plans that support the teaching of these subjects when they're taught as subjects unto themselves. Now let's talk about early years, where it all begins. So this is a learning journey that builds firm foundations. And I don't know how many of you on this webinar, this training symposium, are working in the early years setting or early childhood education. But we at Oxford University Press, we've designed our curriculum to nurture young children's curiosity and a love of learning. We're developing their social skills, their independence and resilience, a big part of this whole idea of the joy of learning and what we're talking about, well-being education. Obviously, we've created ours to have a seamless transition up into year 1. And we have 7 distinct areas of learning. And for those of you familiar with the EYF, the Early Years Foundation stage here in the United Kingdom, these are the 7 learning areas of communication, language development, physical development, personal, social, emotional development, literacy, maths, understanding of the world, and then the expressive arts and design. It's a whole child approach where not until they get to sort of about 5 years old do we get into subject-specific teaching. It's really blended for the early years, as most settings would be. So in our assessment, we talked about that as part of this as well. And with the assessment, we have access to formative assessment tools. These are like test makers. And then we also have end-of-year tests for a bit more summative work. We have the progression that leads up to international GCSE. And then it's not ready at the moment, but we are in research and development for externally marked standardized end of phase assessments, which can be used with different reporting by different schools, principals, for comparability, for validity. We have resources that we recommend, and I'm sure you're using a range of publishers' resources. Our resources all support the idea of a joy of learning and that idea of nurturing one's well-being and developing people's skills for life. And those types of themes are part of these resources. Professional development, that's that training piece, and I mentioned it before, and I can't I can't not stress the importance of this enough. Training is absolutely key, and we have a very comprehensive program. And I'd be interested to hear from you later, or you can email me about your own training programs. I'll be in India, by the way, and maybe if I could come and visit some of you, do let me know. That would be great. I'm on a research trip there next week. But professional development, comprehensive research-based professional learning and development program. It's designed to meet diverse needs of the international schools. We have ours as a flipped classroom approach. So there's a combination of digital self-access content and synchronous training. We provide webinars and workshops facilitated by expert trainers. It's all fully certified by the Oxford University Press. And here, I'll just take a second and let you take a look here at our professional development for teachers and for school leaders. These are different themes that we've got: assessment literacy, or well-being, or project-based learning. We've got professional development around measuring progress and impact. I'll just take a sip of my coffee whilst you take a look at that. Okay. So in summary, what we're doing, we're putting well-being at the heart of teaching and learning. We're developing global skills. We do support the English National Curriculum here in England. We ensure curriculum coherence and continuity and consistency. We provide a steady progression, and you saw the frameworks before, and that spiral approach and learning design theory. We guarantee accessibility and fairness for English as additional learners, language learners, EAL, because we realize that English is not the first language, though in India, English is really quite proficient. So that's more probably applicable to some of our other international markets where English would be a little bit more of a challenge. Evidence of impact. Yeah, we need to do this all the time. We need to ensure that what we're working works. So what we're operating internationally at the moment, and we did a perceptions of impact study. Now, Oxford University has an affiliation with Oxford Impact, which is from the National Education Research Foundation. And we conducted a study, and the study was about to what extent and how does our Oxford International Curriculum support the development of students' metacognitive skills, this idea of learning to learn, and self-regulation, and helping them to become independent learners. And metacognition and self-regulation are so important. They have been identified in 11 to 14-year-olds as probably the one or two single most predictive aspects of children's academic future success. And what I mean by that is children who understand how to learn and students that can regulate their emotions better at that pivotal age group, 11 to 14, tend to have a more sophisticated and mature view of life. And that helps them later with challenges that they're faced. So it gives them a better foundation for health, mental health, and it gives them a more sophisticated and more, I would say, well, just a better approach to teaching and learning, because they actually figure out ways of learning to learn on their own. So that's why it was really important that we looked at this. And what we found was that from this study, perception study, and we spoke to 25 different schools around the world and more teachers, that the participants reported a very strong positive impact on developing learners' metacognitive skills, specifically around critical thinking, teamwork, and leadership. And then we also found the participants reported a very strong positive impact on developing learners' self-regulation skills. Now, so what have we got in summary then, basically? Education today, not preparing people well enough for the ever-changing uncertainties of the future. Education today, not really nurturing children's well-being enough. And this is evidenced by the terrible statistics that mental health is becoming more and more of a crisis everywhere in the world. So education for tomorrow will better equip children with the resilience, with the strategies to cope, with the skills for the ever-changing workplace, and also teach them how to nurture and protect their own well-being so that they're happier and healthier. And this will all guard them, or I should say, give them a shield to that two-headed monster that I talked about in the beginning. Put a shield there, and hopefully we'll have happier children studying in all of our schools in India, in England, in the United States, and around the world, and have a better tomorrow. I thank you all very much for the time. I'm going to stop sharing. I don't know if on timing, we should be, if there are questions, I haven't had a chance to look at the chat because I'm in presenter mode of my screen. So I'm going to stop now and just say thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mathew. Well, indeed, problems that we are facing today is far more uh, larger than life problems that we were facing many, many years ago. As you had this metaphor of the dual-headed monster, rightly said, mental health and well-being with skill gap, something came knocking back to us, asking us, are we doing enough? Right. And I'm proud of the fact that Oxford Press is very much invested into research and trying to find out ways to enrich the curriculum to fill those gaps. And we have been proudly using your books over our schools, and we have been trying to cater those to fill those gaps up. What an ideal atmosphere to be in today. So pleasured, so overwhelmed with so many thoughts in my head. Like thanking is just a word, but thank you for bringing in that perspective to all of us today. Thank you for just putting that light on the statistics, the point right in front of us to make us think. We have to think more beyond this, right? So that brings us to the end of Mr. Mathew Davidson's session. It was a pleasure to have you here with us today for our e-symposium, Konnect 2K22. Hope you enjoyed as much as we enjoyed. The forum is open for questions. If anybody has any questions that you want to ask him, please make sure that you put it on the chat, please.
Well, Danisha, thank you very much for having me. I hope it wasn't too doomy and gloomy with the two-headed monster, but I think we are living through challenging times, and I think obviously the pandemic has brought that into sharp sharp picture. And now I guess people are hearing in the news as well about COP27 is happening. And I could have talked about like the three-headed monster, because that's a whole nother area about sustainable development. But I think we start small, right? We start with the people, the individuals, and I think, as you can tell, I'm quite passionate about, and I am a father and I have my own children, and I really think that healthy children are better students, and all I want for my children is to be happy and healthy in life. And I'm sure they will do well academically, but if they're not happy and healthy, that's the biggest challenge. And then I think I want them to be successful, as well. When they do leave school and they go, I want them to get into a good university, and then I want them to have a very fulfilling job. So they need to have those types of skills that can give them advantages in life. Yeah. So is there any question? Oh, let me check the chat.
Some questions up.
Okay, could you moderate the question? I didn't see. Okay.
Yeah, I just look at them. Is there any organization where we can have curriculum writing training program? Curriculum designing, curriculum writing is mentioned on the question, but somebody is interested into understanding curriculum designing much more in detail. So does Oxford Press offer anything on that note?
We could support schools in that. We don't have any actual textbooks about curriculum design itself, which is a very interesting idea. But I'm sure we could support that. And then we do various, as I showed, the professional development training modules. So we have more about curriculum implementation, but curriculum design is a very good idea for another topic for training. So I'll take that away. That's a good point.
Yeah. And the second question is, how can I avail the details about Oxford Curriculum and Assistance?
Oh, we have, I have my colleagues, around, we have colleagues that would get in touch with, I think, yes, there's smita.shetty@oup.com and manish.asnani@oup.com. Yes. And I think Danisha, you could make
Yes,
them
sure, sir. I
available.
can share those details.
Yeah, that would be great.
There's somebody who's shared the details up here. Yeah, that's Smita Shetty who's shared her details on the chat for everyone to take note of. Gayatri just wants to say, very well said, but I believe many still do not have the privilege and access to this education. So the problems are actually beyond the two-headed monster. Do we have an online program for children as part of extracurricular activity coming from Oxford?
We're preparing to have our curriculum delivered more digitally, if that's what the question is about. The other thing that possibly this teacher or this principal is asking is about, like, if you don't go to an expensive private school, like then what, And I think that's a fair point. We are currently trying to find scholarship programs for the Oxford International Curriculum so that we have more equity and more reach in the world. But I think it's that's something that we are looking into, and it is a very valid point. And it's something that we would like, because this person is right that the points that I've mentioned apply to everyone, whether you're rich or poor, clearly. I think that is true.
All right, so we are bang on time. We need to move now to the next session. Thank you, Mr. Mathew Davidson, for putting so much light into what well-being, skill gap, and what other kind of problems that we're facing. I hope we get a chance to talk again and build more on what we have been planning and thinking about, right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And good luck with your education. And thank you again to the Rahul College of Education for having me.
Thank you so much.
Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you.
Goodbye.
See you. Yeah. All the